This is the Free Zone Communiqué, transmitting from Virginia's unoccupied sector. If you think smart cities, DEI, censorship, government intrusion, bug paste, and other left-wing nonsense are no longer a possibility, think again. We've won one election with slim majorities. Our work to rebuild a free and sane America has just begun.
This is the Free Zone Communique on the P4B. I'm your host, Matt Jordan. We have a lot going on this week. We want to talk about the week that was, along with the days ahead, which includes a snowstorm. As this podcast hits, the Mid-Atlantic will be in the middle of a snow event. What part of the Mid-Atlantic, huh? Well, look out the window. But as of this taping, it's up for debate. I've been following Dave Toleris at wxrisk.com. If you're a farmer or a snowplow operator, or you're responsible for like a large facility, you should be following Dave at least every week. This morning, I put my amateur weatherman hat on and searched for decent isobar and jet stream maps to try to beat the professionals in forecasting the snow accumulations. All the sites I used to depend on no longer provide decent maps. If anyone out there knows where there's public access to isobar maps, especially forecast isobar maps, drop a URL in the comment section below the media line. But in my search, I happened across NOAA Climate Equitable Climate Services Program. I'll leave a link. What a load of propaganda bullshit. If you are a climate alarmist like that knob Al Gore, or just a rube who actually believes that global warming and climate change is a crisis, you'll masturbate reading this stuff. It's page after page of pablum. If you know, like me, that all the things the alarmists cry about has been happening since the Ice Age, you'll just shake your head. The propaganda line that kills me is talk of more intense and frequent catastrophic events. That means weather. When there's a dearth of quote events, and I point that out, climate weenies shout, "It's not about the weather." Then when we have any kind of weather event, the same weenies shout, "See, I told you." The fact is there is no discernible pattern to our weather climate. The number of hurricanes varies wildly in terms of intensity and frequency. And of course, the weenies only seem to notice when the weather climate hits the U.S. A few years ago, I watched a huge number of strong storms form and die in the Atlantic. Not a peep from the alarmists. They didn't get orders from that knob Al Gore. The climate cult leaders know there is no money to be made unless an event gets on the news for a few days. Then you start hyping your next climate change bill. All that because I wanted to check the morning weather. It's a good thing I wasn't searching the odds on the Super Bowl. Great. Now I have that stuck in my head. Okay. Eagles, Super Bowl. Odds. Yep.
Yippee-ki-yay, mother.
So, as of the end of the week, Johnson is the speaker again. Fine. I'm not against it, but I'm not popping champagne corks either. And it didn't happen before the GOP side of the aisle made a circle jerk of the exercise. I'd be interested to hear what the two holdouts got for their vote. If it was a committee seat, they can kiss my ass. If it was something for the American people, like a scheduled vote on a bill to eliminate the Department of Education or something similar, then I'd say, well done. Now, why do I feel so cynical about that? Surely Massey's little fit of look at me, must be punished. That's a figure of speech, of course. But the party did warn that anyone who threw sticks in the spokes at the opening of the new Congress would be primaried. If the RNC is to be taken seriously, they should have people in Kentucky 4th District today looking for the next GOP candidate for Congress. If they dither, they'll have more self-serving defections in both houses. While the haggling was going on, I saw a couple of people stand up and demand the territories in D.C. participate in the voting. The entire Democratic caucus stood up and cheers. But nobody cares about that. The Dems have had countless opportunities to get the ball rolling on that, and they have not been interested. And the goons who brought it up knew there is no way you can just demand the vote, even if the House is predisposed to grant the votes. Just before handing Johnson the gavel, the dull-eyed moron, Hakeem Jeffries, demonstrated why this country is in such trouble. In a low-class attempt at show-stealing, Jeffries went on a tear about the left's agenda. The drivel that stuck out for me was his talk about Social Security and Medicare. He said we must not touch either program, no means never. It's talk like this that will be the downfall of both programs and a lot of other things as well. The great offense here is that we've seen the train wreck coming for many decades. On 2 occasions in the last 30 years, legislators put stupid band-aids on this gaping, sucking chest wound. We needed to take some mildly difficult steps then in order to make the program stable and sustainable. From where we are now, it may not be possible to save the program at all. But to be certain, if Congress generally behaves as political whores, then the destruction of Social Security and Medicare are cast in iron. Every time one somewhat gutsy member of either house has suggested fixing any of these broken, looted programs, that member is dogpiled by whores from both parties. They accuse him of throwing Granny over the cliff or other such childish bullshit. Never in my memory has any of the proposed fixes included cutting anything for present recipients, as unfair as that would be to those paying in right now. All recommendations have been centered around grandfathering out the illusions these programs are right now and gradually switching over into an increasingly private savings agreement for future recipients. For example, the closer you are to retirement, the less your payments into the fund would change. You continue to accrue at or near what you were going to accrue from the government anyway. The younger the working citizen, the more they would set aside in a mandated private account, and the less they would pay into a pretend, quote, fund. The payments into the fund would drop to zero for those who are just entering the work world today. A note about the fund. For the record, there is no such fund. By paying into the present system, you are only providing some of the money present recipients need. Your stupid, dishonest, irresponsible government is printing the rest, the lion's share. The simple fact is that Medicare and Social Security were both scams to steal money for the general fund to support ever more spending by political whores. Most of that money goes to cronies. The funds have had $0 in them almost since the inceptions of the programs. If you're in your mid-40s, you will do far better than the people in the same income bracket did when I was in my 40s by staying on the full program for their last 20 years of work. What the political whores are most concerned about isn't Granny. As I say almost weekly, they don't care about you. What worries them with private savings programs is that every year, almost every month, they'll have fewer and fewer of your dollars to steal. They'll be forced to do fewer and fewer wasteful but popular things for the takers in society. And the biggest takers are crony companies who benefit the most from government largesse. But if we don't do some very difficult stuff very soon, there will be no Medicare and Social Security. The Treasury Department is not going to print its way out of this one. And our present pack of corrupt creeps running the show will insist we do just that for as long as they can milk their seats. Then the system will collapse, and the political whores like Jeffries, McConnell, Pelosi will parachute into retirements as very wealthy people. But that's not what I wanted to talk about today. We'll get to the good stuff right after this. You too can be a pooper. In 2018, I was an author with a WordPress site. My mission was to create better politicians by informing and inspiring the best of our voters. I succeeded one voter at a time, but there are more than 200 million of you out there. So I started the P4B, then the Jordan Corey Show, and ultimately the Free Zone Communiqué to widen my reach. Now we hope to rekindle your sacred, your important archival knowledge, and channel it toward building a healthier, more productive republic. You can add your voice in the comment section. Our words will echo, but how loudly and for how long depends on you. The more you support us, the louder the echo. The more you share, the more ears the echo will reach. We're working to improve our delivery and expand our reach. Subscriptions are still 100% free. Help us grow numerically and technically and remain a free site. You can donate directly or support our affiliate sponsors. There are buttons below the media line of this episode. Click on those for, I don't know, Trump gear, Free Zone gear, P4B gear, or just shop Po River. I've reduced all the clothing, the t-shirts, the jackets, the hats to my cost plus shipping charged by Etsy. I feature some of the items, including the 65 hoodie below the media line. That's the one you see right here. The 65 hoodie is cool. You will be wearing the solution to regaining our republic right on your back. So share every post and episode. Subscribe or follow on Substack and Rumble. Become a political party pooper. You get it? Political party pooper? Pretty good. It's great, right? I've been thinking about New Orleans and Las Vegas, watching the two lunatic incidents unfold last week. A lot of old issues reemerged in my mind. I've discussed them in the past, but now my reach is a bit wider. It's a good time to bring them up again. The most infuriating thing is the speed at which the government shows us how much they already know about the idiots who already pulled off their jobs. Was he on their radar? Where was he radicalized? Did he have help, etc.? The reason they can access this information so fast is because they do have tons of information on every citizen in the country. The more time people spend online, the more phone calls and texts we make, the more we use credit cards, the more Uncle Stinky knows about all of us. They've been collecting reams of information on us for decades now. Whenever public support would erode for the programs they use to collect this information, someone would announce that the government would be less intrusive. Then they would change the name of the collection program and carry on exactly as they did the day before. When they do defend the activity, we're told they need this level of collection to keep us safe from terrorists, foreign and domestic. This is pure police state bullshit, as you'll see in a minute. The New Orleans piece of shit was talking about being part of ISIS on Facebook. The government computers, I guarantee you, scooped that up in real time. So given that, why didn't they at least take a cursory look at the guy? The answer is because no one saw it. They have too much information to ever act on it and stop an attack in a timely fashion. If you had an army of people doing nothing but reading the output this data monster produces, and we likely do, they are unlikely to ever happen across a real plot in 10 lifetimes. When officials do thwart a plot, it isn't because an alarm sounded at DHS and a computer spit out a warning saying some man named Jabbar is likely to be involved in an attack real soon. It doesn't work that way. The quote successes happen in one or two ways. An alert citizen sees something suspicious, an event or a person, and reports it to the police. The police relay the information to the appropriate federal officials. Action must be taken now. Too many people know about it. The federal beast must be made to do its job now. The other way plots are stopped is because the potential terrorist, kidnapper, bomber, assassin goes looking for weapons and bombs and recruits. These guys are usually members of the lowest intellectual quintile among our citizenry. Their search, of course, takes them to the seedy underbelly of society. While people there are not upstanding citizens, they do know there's advantages to giving the authorities a nibble now and then. Some of them, known criminals, are on the payroll for that reason. I don't have to wind it out. Undercover guys move in, set up the rube, and arrest them in, quote, the conduct of a crime, as we saw with the Whitmer kidnapping plot. Then we get the big splashy announcement about how bright our guys are and how evil the demonstrably stupid criminals are. But successes, thanks to the big data monster, are rare to non-existent. And that isn't the real reason the monster exists. While some people cheered such a capability and believed it was really for our national security, the only application it is good for is warehousing information to use against citizens should the need arise. And to the government's mind, the need emerged several times over the last 4 years. So how do we fix this? First, we address the shitty priorities of the people exploiting information on the system. For 4 years, the cabal has used the system to pursue grandpops who sing songs in front of abortion clinics. They sent SWAT teams out to take them down. For 2 years, the FBI pulled people from child trafficking investigations to investigate parents who spoke out against DEI and trans fad issues. Again, when you have the data and the name you want to search, you get everything you want on the guy. Following them is easy. Showing up at their door looking very stern is a message. Don't disagree with the cabal. Look at what we can do to you. Big Brother is watching. The cabal has spent more time tracking down every face they could identify on the mall on 1/6. In response to a mini riot involving hundreds of people out of hundreds of thousands, they wasted resources on the largest manhunt in history. The vast majority of people arrested were collared for trespassing and parading. Few of those prosecuted were on the fence line fighting anyone or breaking windows. In the process of that investigation, federal air marshals for 3 years were pulled off planes and assigned to track down and follow the evil paraders. They had the data. So what else has the government doing with our information? Well, the FBI, the NSA, the DOJ, and UNESCO, an anti-American organization, have teamed up with universities on our dime and social networks on our dime to make sure that anything said against the cabal is downlisted or outright banned from your eyes and ears. These are the shitty priorities that need to change. In the meantime, the video of the pipe bomber on 5 January 21 was corrupted. The cameras that could have ID'd the bombers were oddly skewed out of place to miss the mark. And with all the data on everybody, they say they can't even guess who was at that place alone late at night. And without a name, there's not much to go on for a data search. Too much intel is as bad as not enough intel in an honest investigation. And too much data in the hands of the cabal is only there to control the lives of citizens and ruin opponents. At this moment, the data collected by our government is incapable of serving any other purpose. So step 2 to getting us closer to using intelligence in a real way is to stop collecting every scrap of data on every single citizen and start narrowing things down that we want to look at in pursuit of national interest. That's not my membership to Super Dirty Girls Do Everything Porn Club. And it's not you being disgusted with men in women's locker rooms. Step 3 is to shrink the size of the intelligence monster. We never needed an entirely new department performing missions that overlapped with other entities. We needed a leaner, meaner, cleaner intelligence system. We needed fewer people at the top and more people in the field. We need more analysts and more discriminating information for them to analyze. This should be the top priority of the new Congress and the White House. Finally, the stovepiping of intel we were promised would end hasn't ended. This is the practice of intelligence and police organizations not sharing critical information with other entities. This is the practice that ensured the success of the scum on 9/11. It's likely the cause of all our intelligence failures since World War II. Stovepiping, some call it siloing, should be a criminal act, and those responsible should be made an example. Also, there's the concept of doing something. I wrote about this about a decade ago, but haven't succeeded in finding it here or in the congressional record. But it is in the record. During the debate preceding the abortion known as the Patriot Act, a congressman stood in the well and said that Congress must pass something quickly so they would give the appearance of, quote, give the appearance of doing something, end quote. At that moment, I knew whatever we saw in response to 9/11 was going to be a political circle jerk, and I was right. As I said earlier, we got an even more bloated, less capable government, and all the power vested in government as a result has been abused and will not be surrendered without a major fight, if ever. I get the same sickening feeling in my gut every time a dork gets on the boob tube and says, we must do some nebulous notion so that this will never happen again. I heard that phrase repeatedly last week after a religious nutbag inspired by foreign drug runners plowed through Bourbon Street. It doesn't really matter what kind of event we're discussing. The thing you're discussing, shootings, bombings, vehicular assaults, will all happen again. But the political whores and the befuddled police officials feel better telling you they will see to it the same kind of thing will never happen again. After everything we've seen, why didn't Bourbon Street already have hydraulic bollards up? The kind that drop below grade when not in use. Like after the Twin Towers bombing, or after 9/11, or after the Paris concert, or numerous shootings and vehicle attacks. I mean, we were told by all the political whores involved that they would see to it that these things would never happen again. So why do they? Well, for one thing, the official involved either lacks the vision or the balls to do what's needed. Let's look at 9/11, for example. In the 1970s, Israel nailed shut their cockpit doors in flight. Nobody gets to the pilot under any circumstances. Nobody. Their hijackings dropped to zero. Americans and European airlines continued to suffer one hijacking after another for another 10 years. Passengers were tortured, passengers were killed, planes were blown up. Why didn't we follow Israel's example? In 1994, Tom Clancy, one of the most popular authors at the time, especially among military and intel guys, wrote a book ending with a 747 being flown into the Capitol building during a State of the Union address. Connect this mentality with the Israeli hijacking response. I did. When I read that story, my immediate reaction was to think that our guys were the smart ones, right? And already had safeguards in place. So a nutbag couldn't grab a plane and do that. We didn't. In 2000, our FBI was informed that there were people in this country taking flight simulator lessons on 767s who were not interested in taking off and landing, just steering. The FBI sat on the info. As it turns out, the CIA was aware these religious nutbags on the watch list were in this country, but they had lost track of them. Did they tell the FBI? Nope. Stovepiping, right? At no time on this timeline did anyone insist on sealing off cockpits or hunting down nutbags or reporting the flight training. No vision and no sack on a single one of the agents and policymakers involved. And that is why we will never, ever prevent mass killings and other lunatic actions by nutbags, religious or otherwise. To be certain, my small brain cavity was not the only one to consider bollards on Bourbon Street while standing there looking at the crowd. I will say with 100% confidence, the issue has been mentioned many times over the last 20 years. But the visionless, sackless losers in charge had countless reasons not to take the step. There are always excuses, none of them worth a shit now. I think the primary concern was that people get shit-faced on Bourbon Street. They would surely forget the bollards were up at night. They'd stagger into them, trip over them, or pass out and smack their stupid heads on them. Now the newly minted Gork's family is going to sue the city. We don't want lawsuits. Now fast forward to last week. We have 14 dead and 35 injured, and they're all taking the city to court. They're going to win and win big. So now the bollards will go in. At a time certain, every night, traffic will be stopped, the bollards will be raised. Great. The NOLA police chief said that people on Bourbon Street didn't die in vain. Yes, they did. Adding a fix that should have been there years ago doesn't make the deaths last week meaningful. It shows how pointless all the death was. Now cities all over the country are talking about adding yet more layers of shit on top of the layers of barely effective shit they have right now to invade our privacy, treat us more like cattle, and basically see to it the religious nutbags win. And the bonus, here's how it'll work. While huge crowds are milling about outside the great new security crap added to, we'll say, a stadium, let's say Lincoln Financial, well south of Patterson Avenue. Big new gates, much wider security area to fight your way through. A nutbag shoots a bus driver, and the crowds crossing Patterson Avenue get plowed down by a nutbag driving a stolen bus. You can never stop it all from happening again. You help no one by appearing to do something. DJT update. Until we succeed with Project 65, there's a link below the media line. We need to do as much to clean up the swamp as possible on a regulation and policy level. To that end, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to encourage, nag, or shame your senators in D.C. to approve Trump's nominees quickly. Tell them to end the sanctimony and the pomposity and approve these serious people who have demonstrated their love of country over themselves already. The oversight of Congress in this process should not be dictated by a senator's political views, but by the nominee's ability to carry out the assignment in support of what we already know is the agenda of the President of the United States, limited only by laws governing their actions, regardless of what the President thinks. With that qualifier, there are no nominees that I'm aware of who should not be confirmed. Below the media line, I will leave a sample message for you to send to your senators. Email is okay. Snail mail would be better. Lots of snail mail is more poignant as a statement. Find your senators at the link. Also at the link, you'll find their mailing address by clicking on your senators' listings. Now go harangue your senators. Good luck.
Please tell a friend about the Free Zone Communiqué. We live and die with the share and subscribe buttons. Please use affiliate and sponsor buttons to support our work. Thank you very much for joining us today.